Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to take some time to talk about one of my favorite archetypes from Dark Archive, the Living Vessel. The Living Vessel archetype is super interesting and can actually be pretty horrifying depending on how you look at it, but that isn't my favorite part. The Living Vessel is an archetype that takes the common trope of sealing some kind of powerful entity inside of you and gives a mechanical benefit for it to all types of PCs. Not just a specific playstyle. Really, it's wonderful, so let's get into it. Alright, so before we get into what you get from this whole archetype, we should probably talk about the entity that is sealed inside of you. See, there isn't any real restriction on what this entity has to be, so you can get really creative with it. However, since Paizo is limited by page space in their books, there are only rules written down for having a demon, a fae, or an eldritch abomination inside of you. You can absolutely have something else, but you and your GM will just have to come up with a feat to represent that creature. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the Living Vessel dedication. There are two parts to this dedication. First off, you have to appease your possibly literal inner demon. After all, you've got someone along for the ride, and if you don't keep them satisfied, they will make your life insufferable. This can make many different forms depending on what exactly is inside of you, but ultimately, what you have to do to assuage them is entirely dependent on your GM. You might just have to meditate, you might have to play pranks, or you might have to commit blood sacrifices. Like I said, it comes down to your GM. Who knew that having a literally bloodthirsty demon inside of you could complicate your social life? Regardless, no matter what assuaging your entity takes, it takes an hour, and if you don't do it for a day, then you take a -1 penalty to all will saves for 24 hours. And if you don't assuage your entity for a full week, then you become doomed 1 and you stay doomed until you give the entity your body for a full day to do whatever it wants. Basically, just assuage the entity as much as you can, because otherwise things get complicated. The second part of the Living Vessel dedication is a bit more fun. Since if you die, the entity dies, it'll help you out if you're on the edge of death. As a reaction, whenever you would be reduced to 0 hit points but not immediately killed, the entity takes control over your body. You stay at 1 health, and you get some temporary HP, and then for the next minute, the entity is in control. As the entity is far beyond you in power, it has a +1 status bonus on attack and damage rolls, though you don't really have any control over your own actions anymore. The GM is supposed to control your character and roleplay as the entity, though they might allow you to play them since GMs probably don't want to have the responsibility of playing a PC on the edge of death, and also if you're a high-level PC, they probably don't know all your tricks. Something to keep in mind is that unless the situation is highly abnormal, even evil entities aren't likely to betray the party and switch sides. They just want to destroy the current threat. Moving on from the first feat of the archetype, at level 4 Living Vessels can get the entity's strike feat. Effectively, the entity has been a part of you long enough now that it has some control over the form of your actual physical body. You get an unarmed attack dependent on the entity. It's just a basic attack that deals 1d6 points of damage with agile and finesse, but the fun part is describing how it changes your PC. Like, do you grow huge horns, or does a tentacle sprout from your arm? There are tons of different options, and I highly encourage working together with your GM to figure this out, since your PC probably isn't going to appreciate the changes to their body, but it's pretty important that you, the player, are happy with them. So you know how I previously mentioned that it's not good for the entity if you die? Well, now you can actually heal yourself by borrowing the entity's power because, it doesn't want to die. If you take the Tap Vitality feat at level 6, once an hour as an action, you can take some of the entity's life force. This heals you by an amount equal to 4 times your level, which is just as good as the best healing focus spells, albeit you can only use it once an hour instead of once every 10 minutes. This doesn't come without consequences, though, since some of the entity's personality is going to bleed over into your own. The more you use Tap Vitality, the more your personality and behavior are twisted away from what is normal for you. This lasts until you spend an hour to assuage your entity. You're probably already doing this every day, but if you've used Tap Vitality, you might want to start doing it more often, so, you know, the demon inside of you doesn't make you extraordinarily bloodthirsty. At level 8, you can grab a feat that gives you an ability based on the actual entity inside of you. This is where your choice of what the entity inside of you is going to be really important, and where you and your GM will have to homebrew if you've gone with a different identity than what the book provides. From the options in the book though, you do get some great feats. If you've got a demon inside of you, you can corrupt your weapons and body, which causes your attacks to deal poison damage until the end of your next turn. This does only start off as 1d6, but the higher level you get, the more damage it deals. Plus, you also poison people that touch you, so I hope your allies don't have any touch spells they want to cast. Fey entities can grant the ability to cast Mirror Image once an hour, which is honestly pretty amazing. While Mirror Image isn't nearly as powerful as it has been in the past, it's still a great defensive buff in 2e. Finally, if you've got an apparition inside of you, you can cause someone that you've got grappled to have a very bad day. As an action, you have tentacles and tendrils extend from your body to crush them. This does some bludgeoning and mental damage, and it's absolutely horrifying to imagine. Who would guess that having an Eldritch Abomination inside of you is pretty freaking scary? The final feat in this archetype is somehow even more over the top than the rest of it, which is honestly impressive at this point. Vessel's form allows for you to change yourself once a day into a symbiotic hybrid of your own abilities in your own body and the entities. The main thing here is that you actually maintain control of yourself and it doesn't bleed over into your own personality. Plus, you are now large-sized, you get a +2 status bonus on attack and damage, get a +1 status bonus on saves versus spells, and if you actually end up getting knocked below 0 and use Entity's Resurgence, the bonus to attack and damage increases to a +3. But that's not all. If you have Entity's Strike, then the damage dice from that attack increases to d8s, and you also get 40 temporary HP, and you get a fly speed equal to your land speed. Basically, in a pinch, you can accept the entity within you and enter into your final form. Really, this is just a super strong feat, and it's so over the top in anime that I can't help but love it. Another important thing to keep in mind here is that this isn't only good for martials, as the bonus to attack also applies to spell attack rolls. So you can go nuts. Plus, that also applies to Entity's Resurgence that you have probably had since level 2. And that's it for the Living Vessel archetype rules as written. More than any other archetype in the game, I feel like this archetype really begs for homebrew being used to customize it. While there is only one feat that depends on your entity type in the book, there's nothing stopping your GM from just coming up with way more. Especially if you just want to lean into this as a core concept for your character. Like, yeah, there's only one level 8 feat that depends on having a demon, but if you want your whole character to be about having a demon inside of him, your GM, if they're willing, can just come up with a bunch of feats to supplement that. Seriously, this is a super fun archetype that I genuinely adore, and I hope you do too. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this the day that this video comes out, then Happy New Year's Eve. I'm looking forward to next year, and I've got some fun plans. That out of the way though, do any of you have experience with this archetype? And even if you don't, what are some fun ideas for outsiders that aren't listed in the book that can be used as entities? I'm personally a fan of using an Aeon as an entity because Aeons are just cool, and the Hounds of Tentalos because that'll just be weird. Let me know in a comment down below, and subscribe while you're down there, or something I guess. Regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.